Rory, Joe, Maul, and Parks, collectively known as the Joe Budden Podcast, versus Spotify. Joe, and today's episode is going to be about the Joe Budden Podcast and their fight with Spotify. But it's not really their fight with Spotify, it's more their fight for value in their intellectual property. So the Joe Budden Podcast started a few years ago under the moniker, I'll name this podcast later, which I thought was a great fucking name and that they should have kept that, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So they transitioned to the Joe Budden Podcast, and they now have the team of Rory, Parks, Maul, and Joe. And there's other people obviously behind the scenes like Screen Man, Savon, and the rest of the team. And 2 years ago, they signed a deal with Spotify, and then they started doing 2 podcasts a week. And they stated that the main reason for them doing this deal was to get on another digital streaming platform, as well as to gain data. Their main sole purpose of this was to gain data, because the podcast industry is very new. And it's just like how the streaming industry was a few years ago, when it was like brand new and we didn't know how to get the value. So now that they've said that 1,500 streams equals one album or one single, or now they found the data to get the number for how they're going to determine how they're going to pay or how things should be valued. So Joe and the team went in with the idea that that's what they were going in for, to get the data, because they are essentially some really big pioneers in the podcasting industry. And they've also been the number one podcast for some time now. So during, obviously when you sign a contract, things are, you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. When teams sign a basketball player, they don't bank on them getting injured, or they hope that they don't, but, things are inevitable. You never, when Michael Jordan first got signed, they didn't know that he was going to turn around and be like $1 billion brand athlete. Nobody never knows. So obviously things, when as the contract goes and things are being, brought to our attention, and hey, you're number one, that obviously raises some eyebrows. So on a particular episode of the Joe Budden Podcast, they kind of broke down their Spotify relationship and what's going on with them. So that's what I'm here to talk about, because it was probably one of my favorite episodes, because I'm an econ junkie. So anything in this realm is my favorite thing. So they signed the deal to get the data, and they obviously got the big bag, and then Spotify obviously used this as a blueprint to try to gain other podcasters, and they paid for Amy Schumer and the Joe Rogans and all of these big name people, and they dropped big bags. Understandable. These people have equity in their name and in their craft and things, so obviously that they feel that hey, this is a big box office person, or hey, this person's getting numbers over here, so obviously it's going to translate over here. And it didn't necessarily translate that well. Obviously the Amy Schumer podcast, even this whole thing with the celebrities thinking that they could just get in and start talking. It's well, who the fuck cares what you have to say? And then it just comes off a little bit contrived, and people, Joe did it, and just because he's so brutally honest about himself, and he has regular people. So, you relate to it more than I'm going to get on there and want to hear a celebrity. That's just my own personal preference. Joe found a really good balance, and the chemistry between him and his gentleman, it just works out really well. So over time, they got other people in, paid big bags, and Joe and his team didn't fall from the number one. This number one, we don't really know, but they're number one in this podcasting. So obviously, if you're number one, or you're doing big numbers, you want to feel like you're getting adequately compensated for that. And so, midway through their contract, and that, bonuses and things are supposed to, be distributed because, obviously they're making more money than they anticipated. But the Joe Budden Podcast aren't necessarily, they got their bag. Let's just throw out $1 million. Definitely got more than that. Let's say they got $1 million, and the, Spotify was like, oh, like, we're probably going to make like 10 million off of them. So we'll pay $1 million. We're going to make 9 million. That's great. But let's just throw it out and say, well, Spotify probably made 20 million off of that. And so that's that extra 10 million. Where's my little extra cut, and that's what Joe was kind of talking about a little bit. So, in their contract, this was the funniest thing though. They tried to, these damn labels, they tried to give them watches, like Christmas gifts. They were like, oh, go get some watches. And then told them talk about how, they picked, semi-modest watches, and they kept saying no and no and no and no until they ended up it ended up kind of just going away. And I'm sitting here like baffled. And well, who the fuck is in charge, and how are they dropping the ball? Because this is, these aren't people too upset. This is a big team. They're bringing a lot to the table and a lot to the podcasting. They are true pioneers, and they still are ringleaders in this. So, first of all, how dare you disrespect them by trying to throw some fucking rollies at them? Like, they all were like, yo, we could buy ourselves that, as you fucking should be able to. And then I couldn't even get brand new ones. Y'all wanted me to get used ones, and then I wasn't even trying to pay the price of the used ones. And it was just a lot of disrespect. Lots of disrespect. And I was just sitting there like, when I was just listening to the episode, I'm like, wow. I thought somebody in the marketing team and somebody in the contract office, or whoever the hell is running the show would have had a little bit of more common sense to try to, give these guys a little bit more what they wanted. Obviously, they don't want to give the data. As Joe Budden said, they don't want them to know what they're truly worth so that they can pay them nickels and dimes. And Joe Budden and his team is not here for that. And I'm grateful that Rory and Mal and Parks are all very supportive of him. Like, hey, no, we can't take the big bag up front and then cry later when we realize that, oh, we're worth 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times what they gave us. And Joe has had a lot of experience in this. He was an artist, got signed at 17, had a hit song, and then got caught in a deal. He said he was just now getting his publishing back. I'm like, dude, you're 40. You signed a deal at like 17, 18, 19, and you're just now getting your ownership back? What kind of fucked up deal did you sign? And, he's trying to prevent that from happening. And it seems like the forces that be aren't understanding what his goal or what his intentions are. His intentions are not to be working. His intentions are to have knowledge of his value, his intellectual property, because everybody's intellectual property has a value. And the value is determined by these people. And we want to know, how did you come up with that? How did you get that number? Who the fuck said that 1,500 streams equals one album sale or whatever? Who the fuck said that? And how do we know that's right? I just want to know. If I drop my podcast on Wednesdays and Friday and Saturdays, and 1 million people are watching here and 1 million people are watching there, and they're watching for 2 and 3 hours long, there's a lot of value in that. And I just want to know. But y'all are not trying to give me that information, because if we restrict you from that, then you'll take the nickels and dimes and be happy with that. Because if I give you $1 million, you'd be like, oh, wow, great, that's $1 million, when I could have really got 5 off of you. And then 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, when I'm broke, or money's not sitting right, or somebody else is getting the bag that I thought I should be getting worth, because that's what they also talked about. Other people getting on there and getting some odd 100 million or so, and they're like, well, where's not that they felt like they should get that bag, but something comparable to what their intellectual property is worth. So he's just really on this fight for that. And it seems like a lot of forces are against him. So another radio personality, podcasting personality, Charlamagne, has had a lot to say about it. And it hasn't been too nice. And really shocking. I'm like, I thought we were all preaching, ownership, Black empowerment, and it's kind of really sad that your friend isn't necessarily as supportive. Even though they might not, if you don't have to agree, but you can just say, hey, we'll fight for what you believe in, and everything. Not feel that their way is the right way, and it's a little, the smear campaign is a little heavy. Joe Budden's ex-girlfriend, Tahiri, now comes out, and it's a lot of abuse allegations, and it's like, okay, we've heard this story before. Why are you bringing it up now? What are you hoping to gain from this, and why all of a sudden now, this could have came out any other time, you're choosing now. It's just, timing's a little too coincidental, if you ask me, and I don't like it. It comes off really bitter. It really comes that really sad that a woman is using her platform, and then especially after we're just coming out of the whole Votto situation where you kind of attacked him first and then he attacked you back. I'm not here to agree to domestic violence because I do not support it at all. However, what Joe Budden is trying to fight for right now is, whoa, let me catch myself. It's not bigger than domestic violence. However, we've heard this cry before from her. And he's, vehemently, explained his side of the story. Joe's been so forwarding of himself and what's in his past and who he is and what he's done. We know it's like, why now when I'm trying to get the back? Because the abuse allegations have completely stopped careers. So that's kind of sad. And then now Sin comes out and the whole fucking the dog thing. And it's just like, we're jerking off the dog or whatever. And then they went on their Charlamagne and Andrew Schultz went on the brilliant idiots. And it was just like constant jokes on bestiality. I definitely watched it. A couple of funny jokes, not even gonna lie. But it was just, this is our own fighting for their rights. And they're fighting for, they're taking the loss so that somebody else can gain. Because Joe and the Joe Budden podcast, because I really hate that I keep just saying it's Joe and then Rory, Mal, and Parks are not, and Savon and Screamin', and all of them are not a part of it. But everybody who's incorporated with the Joe Budden podcast, they're taking this stance so that they can get the information, so that other podcasts and other people who are, trying to break into this industry know how much they're worth and don't get caught in fucked up deals. And then 5-10 years later crying, oh, I got caught in a bad deal, I didn't get my money, I'm broke, and all of this. The same thing that artists are crying about. Artists cry every day how they took the upfront bag and then they, either skyrocketed or plummeted, and then now they're screwed over. It's like, well, if you take the time to invest in yourself, because the only reason why Joe Budden and them should have been on Spotify was to gain data, because it wasn't like Spotify's paying for their studio, and we know Parks does all the editing and the shooting is done at his house and the cameras, everything's set. It's an in-house project, and everything is the expenses are obviously at a minimal. The overhead costs are, it's so low. So obviously, this is something they can definitely do on their own, and they were doing successfully. And with all the knowledge and everything that they gained from Spotify, it's only going to go up from here. However, what Joe Budden and what the Joe Budden podcast is standing for is something that we should all be fighting for. We should all be fighting for equitable rights in our IP, because if not, we'll keep getting fucked over, and we'll keep being, workers. And it's really sad when somebody, and we people work in an industry where they don't own things they curated. It's people wrote a song, sang the song. They don't own the song, and I'm confused. These 4 or 5 gentlemen picked up their camera, were in their house, edited their things, spoke from their mouths and everything, and all of a sudden somebody's just gonna come own it, and somebody's gonna be able to distribute it and license it out, and they're gonna make money, and I don't get my values worth. I got nickels and dimes when, they got the quarters. Not fair. Not fair. And it's a lesson to everybody that the money up front is never good. And, it's truly understanding your value. And I love Charlamagne, and I'm so happy that he, went the Black Effect podcast network and what he's doing for all the podcasts and everything. But however, don't shun our other brother because he didn't necessarily fall in line with you, because you had maybe he asked Joe and Joe was like, hell no, he's gonna do his own thing. You have to support and you have to respect that, because that's how we grow, and that's how we, gain, more equity in the industry. If we have one and two or three more people who are owners, it's a win-win for us all. So I love the Joe Budden podcast. I'm a faithful listener. I love the different points of views, and I love what their stance is on the Spotify situation. Spotify, you fucked up. You about to fuck up just as hard as when Blockbuster laughed Netflix out the building. No, maybe not that big, but you understand my point. I'm excited to see where the Joe Budden podcast goes from here. It's really, truly nice to see how far they've come, because we've sat back and truly laughed at Joe Budden, and to see the 360 transformation, it's a beauty. And even in Charlamagne, because I'm definitely going to do a video about Charlamagne, because I love him as well. But it's great to see men grow and really leave their childish ways behind them and grow into men. And the things that they speak about now, truly a fan of. Truly a fan of. So, Joe Budden, I'm really excited to see where the Joe Budden podcast goes from here. And really happy to see, Get your IP value, okay? Figure out what you're worth truly, and get it. Okay, so thank you for tuning into the Average Joe podcast. Again, I'm your host here, Joe. Do you think there's an intentional smear campaign incited by Charlamagne the God against Joe Budden? Did Spotify drop the ball by letting the Joe Budden podcast walk away?